Hey YouTube, Hyckory Styck back with you. We're gonna do a little reel maintenance tonight. I had a friend of mine brought some of his reels to me, asked me if I could do some maintenance on them. I said, yeah, I could do it. He said, well, they're gonna need some parts. I said, well, I can take them apart and I can clean them up and we'll see what kind of parts they need. So I asked him, I said, well, when was the last time you maintenance them? He said, I've never maintenance them. I said, well, how long have you had them? He said, 10 plus years. I said, oh Lord, there's no telling what I'm gonna get into. So I started tearing into them. I've already tore one of them down. He brought me two of these Curado 200 or E7s. And then he has brought a couple of others. I'm probably gonna do a video on each one, but we're gonna tear it down, see what the issues are, if any, on this reel, and we're going to see what it needs. He did tell me that he just lined this reel with new line, so I'm gonna have to salvage his line for him. Now I have only tore apart one of these 200 E7s, and that was the one that I just tore apart from him. It's a little bit of a process, but it's not bad. It's not any worse than any other low profile bait caster. We're gonna need a Phillips head, a flat head, and a pick. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this screw out, and he is missing his nut keeper. And I guess I did lie. You're also going to need a crescent wrench, or you're going to need a pair of channel locks. I believe these are also 10 millimeter if you want to use an actual wrench on it. All right, take the handle off. That was not even twisted on completely. Take him off and take your spring off. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this off. He just has to be popped loose. There he is. Now it's got a, let's put this back together here. There's a stack up of washers under this nut. So if you look at it, you've got a flat washer, a concave washer, and a second concave washer. Turn the opposite direction. Next, I will take off the spool tension knob, and there is a pad inside of here, a friction pad inside of there. Don't lose that friction pad. Then you've got your spring, and the next thing you will have will be your bearing. But in order to get the bearing out, we need to take the rest of the reel apart. Let's pop the side off of here, like so. I'm going to try to get this spool out with all this line on it. There we go. Didn't want to come out of there because of the line in the way. There's no bearing on this spool. We're going to set the spool up here with the line on it. Next up, and we can take the gear drive side loose. So you have a series of screws here to take that loose. You've got 3 on this side. This top one is a machine screw, a long machine screw. The one at the 10 o'clock position is a shorter machine screw. And the one on the bottom at the 6 o'clock position is the same length machine screw. Next, you have this screw right here. This screw is actually this entire shaft that the level wind rides on, and it comes out. Now we can get the gear side plate off. We're going to set that to the side for the moment. Alright, next up on here, you have your sleeve, your shaft sleeve. Forgive me folks, I don't know what the actual terminology for some of these parts are. I've got my generic names that I call them. You've got your main gear. Let's see if its main gear come off there easily. Doesn't appear that it wants to. Let me take these two springs off. Let's take our two set springs off first and get those set down so I don't lose them. So I'm going to take my flat head and go between it and the anti-reverse gear. Try to get it to move a little bit. You don't want to pry too hard now because you don't want to bend anything and you don't want to break it. I just want to try to get it moving so that I can get it to come off the shaft. And boys, it is on there. There we go. Now I got it started. On the shaft, the two flat sides on the shaft, under here, those flats end underneath that gear. And I don't think you're going to be able to see it on the camera, but there's a shelf, a little edge right there where the flats end, that you can get your screwdriver between the gear and the flat, and you can twist a little bit to start prying the gear up. There we go. Okay, so now we got the gear off. Now let's take apart the drag, because I am sure he's going to need a new drag system. There's your drag washer, your metal drag washer, and here is your fiber drag washer. Now he wants to go to the Carbon Tech drag, so we're not going to worry about the washer. And I tried to clean this washer up on the previous reel, and it just disintegrated when I tried to clean it up. So I'm going to inspect the gear. I'm just going to try to wipe some of this goop off of it, these 10 years of goop. Now the brass gear here, it's got some, as you can see, it's got some corrosion and pitting on it, and that's true to both sides, but we'll clean that up. Next up, we're going to take the anti-reverse gadget, pawl, grabber, whatever you want to call it, and its pin. I'm going to take that out. Now we're going to slide the anti-reverse gear off, and the fiber drag washer off of that. Now I'm going to pick the pinion and the pinion yoke off. Then we're going to take these two small screws out of the pinion yoke clutch shafts. These are two small machine screws. Let's take a look at this pinion, I'm going to call it the guide, pinion guide. This one is not in terrible condition. Alright, next we're going to take these little shims out of here. There is a little shim right there. Just a little shim. Now we're going to take the clutch housing out. This is connected to a spring. It's connected to that spring right there. And that spring connects in that little hole right there. So we're going to take that loose. When you do, that's going to fall out. We're going to take this little spring. I'm going to take him out. Now we're going to take the gear shaft off. We're going to pull out the screw that is at the 3 o'clock position. It is a little short machine screw. And when I say 3 o'clock, I mean talking in terms of looking at the reel like this. You've got 12 o'clock. That's actually about 3:30, 6 o'clock. That's what I mean by that terminology. And then you've got your 12 o'clock screw and your 6 o'clock screw that you can pull out. They are two machine screws as well. They are the same length. And it just lifts out. It is an assembly with a bearing and a shaft. I'm going to check that bearing while it's on the shaft. And that bearing is very tight. And I don't mean tight, feels good tight. I mean tight as in gummed up and feels like it's seizing. It's going to need to be replaced. Wow, we've got a little keeper key on here. Got it. A little circlip key. And to get the bearing off, there's a little copper washer that is under the bearing, or on top of the bearing. And to get that off, apparently you just turn it over and it falls off. I was going to say you could pull this, but it falls off. So this bearing does not feel good at all. I think we're going to recommend a new one of those. Next up is your gear, your level wind drive gear, and then you're just left with your empty shaft. Next up, we've got our level wind driven gear, and we have our clutch lever. To get the clutch lever off, in there is a screw. Right in there, about where below my finger, is a screw. And to get to that screw, you've got to come through the bottom of the reel like so. And you're going to pull it out, and it is a coarse thread plastic. It's a metal screw, but it's a coarse thread like wood screw. And then your clutch shaft or clutch linkage just pulls out. Then your clutch lever or your clutch pad, thumb pad, will just kind of fall out the way, and it slides over, and you can pick it up, take it off. Next, we want to get your casting clutch side plate off, your palm side plate. So the way you do that is the shaft right here has a little C-clip on it. We're going to pull that C-clip off. Now you can take your side plate loose, and the side plate just slides out. There's a spring on it. Alright, the next thing we're going to take off is the level wind Pawl cover, which is that right there. But in order to get that off, we have to take off this front guide plate. And now that we have the shaft out and everything out of the way, this just slides off. So to take the Pawl cover off, we unscrew the cap. All it is a cap. Unscrew it and take it loose. Now, there is a copper washer inside of this cap. Sometimes it is loose and it will fall out when you unscrew the cap. In this case, it was stuck in the cap, but I got it out. It's important you take that out, because if you clean the cap, particularly if you run the cap through a sonic cleaner, that's going to come out of there, and God knows where to go. Okay, next thing up is the Pawl. To get the Pawl out of there, there's nothing really to grab on, so you kind of got to just get your pick in the hole and see if you can just work it out to the point where you can grab it. There is a lip on the Pawl. As you can see, there's a lip on the Pawl that you can grab once you get it out far enough. Once you got the Pawl out, now you can get your level wind shaft out. To get the level wind shaft out, there's another little C-clip on this side, on the end of the shaft. It's a little tougher to get loose than the other one. There we go. It's off. Now that we've got that off, there is yet again another little copper washer that you need to take off of there. You back the shaft up, and the shaft comes out. Now we can get our little copper washer off of there. Now that we got the shaft out, now we can work our sleeve out, level wind sleeve. Then we've got our level wind line guide. The only thing left in this thing to take apart now is we need to get this bearing out. So we're going to come in from this side with our flathead screwdriver And we're just gonna gently tap it. It does not take much. Just bump it just a little bit and out it comes. And then all you're left with is an empty case. Now, this is actually a Japanese made Curado, so this is a very good Curado. It's an older version. Now we need to get the anti-reverse bearing out. And it just pushes out with your thumb. There it is. And it is in rough shape. Okay, now you really need to take our level wind gear, our driven gear, off our level wind shaft. To do that, you push the gear towards the shaft, which will pop out the T-shaped top. You twist it 90 degrees, line it up with the other slot, pull it off. That's all there is to it. There is a washer on the back side of the level wind driven gear. Last thing we need to do is disassemble the palming side plate. I am not going to take this shaft out. I believe it screws in there. I don't want to run the risk of breaking this side plate. These side plates are old. Afraid they may be brittle, so I'm not going to take it out. We're going to pull the bearing out. There's the bearing keeper in there, the little keeper pin. Get one corner out and we can work it out from there. Next up, we're gonna see if the bearing will come out just by pulling it, and it will. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. Now in the bottom of here, there is another friction plate. So next up, we're gonna take the centrifugal brake housing off the side plate. To do that, we pull these two screws out. They are small wood style screws. When you do that, this plate's going to come apart, and this lock handle is going to fall out. That's all there is to that. It's just a housing. The next thing is your detent ball and spring. And take it out. It has, put your finger over it now when you pull that little screw out. It's got a coarse wood style screw in it. It's the same size as the screw that goes into this plate. Now you can pick your plate up off there, your cover plate, and you've got a little small spring and a keeper ball. And you can separate the two. We need to take the other bearing out of this side plate, the other spool bearing. To do that, I'm going to take this Phillips screwdriver, because this Phillips is too big to go through the hole of the bearing. Now I'm just gonna push down a little bit on it, center of the bearing, pop it out. So that's it for right now. I'm gonna get this thing cleaned up. I'm gonna run all the metal parts through the sonic cleaner. I'm not gonna run the plastic through. Don't run your plastic through sonic cleaner, especially if it's older plastic, because the chemicals may eat it up. The only thing that I did not take apart was I didn't take this little plastic housing out of the drag star. I didn't take that out of there because there's really no reason to. There's a detent ball behind it, and that is something that could go easily amiss. So I'm going to leave that in there. That's not a big deal. This turns freely. So I'm going to get cleaned up, and we will be back when it comes time to reassemble.